The wind came down from the high plains with a mournful cry, carrying the dust of distant places and the faint scent of rain. Eliza Hammond drew her shawl tighter around her shoulders as she looked over the desolate stretch of prairie that had once been her husband's dream. The little cabin that Daniel had built with his own hands now stood half empty, the fields unplowed, the animals gone. Only the whisper of the wind and the whimper of her youngest child broke the stillness. She could scarcely believe how swiftly life could turn from hope to hardship. Just 6 months ago, Daniel had been alive, full of talk about planting wheat and trading furs with the Cheyenne. Then came the fever, sudden, cruel, and unstoppable. Within a week he was gone, buried under a stand of cottonwoods beside the creek. Now she was alone, left with 2 children and the cold indifference of a world that no longer had a place for her. Her in-laws had come soon after the funeral. They spoke of duty and propriety, but their eyes told another story. Daniel's brother Henry had always thought the homestead too far from civilization, too risky, too much for a woman to manage. He said it was best for her and the children to come back east with them, to live under his roof until she might remarry. Eliza had refused. This land had been Daniel's dream, their shared promise. But when her refusal hardened, so did their faces. A month later, after they had taken the livestock and most of the supplies, for safekeeping, they left her behind with nothing but a wagon missing 1 wheel, a few sacks of flour, and the bitter taste of betrayal. The days that followed blurred into one another. Each sunrise brought the same question: how to keep her children alive. 9-year-old Clara tried to be brave, helping with chores far beyond her years, while little Samuel clung to her skirts, too young to understand why his father's laughter had gone silent. Eliza chopped wood, fetched water from the creek, patched the leaking roof, and prayed each night for strength. The loneliness pressed on her like a physical weight. There were moments when she thought she heard Daniel's voice in the rustle of the grass or saw his shadow at the edge of the trees. But it was only the wind, always the wind. By late autumn, the first snow threatened. The sky had taken on that low, gray heaviness that meant the season was turning. Eliza counted her dwindling supplies: half a sack of flour, a handful of beans, no salt left. She knew she would have to make a trip to the nearest settlement, a 2-day journey by foot now that the wagon was useless. She hesitated, torn between fear of leaving the children and fear of staying. In the end, necessity made the choice for her. She packed what little food she had into a cloth bundle, wrapped Clara in her father's old coat, and set out with Samuel on her hip. The prairie was endless, rolling in gold and brown beneath the brittle light. They walked for hours, the children growing quieter as the miles stretched. By evening, clouds gathered, dark and heavy. The wind turned sharp and cold. When the snow began to fall, Eliza searched desperately for shelter. She found it in a shallow hollow near a cluster of rocks, where a few scraggly bushes broke the wind. There she built a small fire with dry grass and sticks, huddling close to her children as flakes swirled around them. The fire smoked and sputtered but gave just enough warmth to keep them alive through the night. When morning came, the world was white and silent. Their tracks had vanished, the horizon blurred. Eliza's heart sank, she had lost her bearings. For hours she trudged on, following the faint sense of eastward she carried in her mind, but the land offered no landmarks, only emptiness. Samuel began to cry from hunger. Clara walked beside her, silent tears freezing on her cheeks. Eliza whispered prayers under her breath, each step a battle against despair. She thought of Daniel again, of his hands rough from work but gentle when they touched her face, of his voice saying, "No matter what comes, Ellie, this land will take care of us if we take care of it." The memory stung because the land had turned its back on her. By midday her strength was failing. She stumbled, catching herself before falling, then stumbled again. She could no longer feel her feet. The snow had thickened, hiding everything but the gray sky. When she finally fell to her knees, clutching Samuel to her chest, she whispered to Clara to keep walking if she could, to look for a tree line, a smoke trail, anything. Clara shook her head fiercely and threw her arms around her mother. Eliza gathered both children close, closed her eyes, and waited for the storm to take them. The sound of hooves reached her first, distant, rhythmic, almost unreal. She opened her eyes, blinking through the snow. A dark shape moved across the white, growing larger, closer. For a moment she thought it was a trick of her freezing mind. Then she saw the horse, a great bay stallion, and the rider upon it, a man wrapped in a buffalo robe, his long black hair bound with a strip of leather. He dismounted swiftly, the snow swirling around him, and knelt beside her. His eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian, scanned her face, then the children. Without a word, he lifted Samuel from her arms and wrapped the boy in his robe. He spoke softly in a language she did not understand, his voice deep and calm, like the rumble of distant thunder. Eliza tried to speak, to explain, but her lips would not move. The man seemed to understand her condition without words. He reached into a pouch at his side, produced a strip of dried meat, and pressed it into Clara's hand. Then, with surprising gentleness, he helped Eliza to her feet and guided her toward his horse. She wanted to resist, some faint instinct of fear stirred by all the stories she had heard about the Cheyenne, but exhaustion and the need to protect her children silenced her doubts. The warrior lifted Clara onto the horse, then Eliza, then mounted behind them, holding Samuel against his chest. He clicked his tongue, and the horse moved forward, steady and sure, through the snow. The ride seemed endless. Eliza drifted in and out of consciousness, dimly aware of the steady rhythm of the horse beneath them and the warmth of the man behind her. When she opened her eyes again, she saw smoke rising from a cluster of lodges ahead, half hidden in the trees along a frozen river. A few figures emerged as they approached, women wrapped in furs, children watching with curious eyes. The warrior spoke briefly to one of the older women, who hurried forward to take Clara and Samuel. Eliza was led into a lodge, where a fire burned bright and fragrant with pine. Warmth flooded her body so suddenly that she began to tremble uncontrollably. Someone pressed a cup of hot broth into her hands. She drank, feeling life return by degrees. When she looked up, the warrior was there, standing near the entrance. He spoke again, this time in halting English. "You are safe here," he said. His voice was steady, his gaze unwavering. "Snow was bad. You would have died." Eliza tried to thank him, but emotion caught in her throat. Instead she nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. The warrior gave a single, solemn nod and left the lodge, leaving her with the women who tended her and her children. The sound of their quiet voices and the crackle of the fire filled the space where her fear had been. Over the next few days, she learned that her rescuer's name was Chayton. The women spoke of him with respect, saying he was a skilled hunter and had once led his people in battle before turning his strength to peace. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried weight. He brought food, meat, roots, and berries dried for winter, and blankets of soft hide for her and the children. Each time he entered the lodge, the others fell silent, not from fear but from reverence. Eliza watched him with a mixture of gratitude and curiosity. She had been taught to fear his kind, to think of them as savages, but nothing about him seemed savage. His movements were deliberate, his eyes filled with intelligence and quiet dignity. As she regained her strength, Eliza began to help with small tasks around the camp, mending garments, fetching water, tending fires. The women welcomed her, though communication was difficult. Clara quickly adapted, learning words faster than her mother, laughing with the children of the camp as if they had been born there. Samuel followed her everywhere, his laughter returning for the first time in months. Watching them, Eliza felt a fragile peace she had not known since before Daniel's death. Still, a part of her remained wary, unsure what would come next, unsure if she was truly safe. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the snow in gold and crimson, Chayton came to the lodge where she sat sewing. He crouched beside the fire, his face illuminated by the flames. "You are a strong woman," he said slowly, choosing his words with care. "You fight for your children. That is good." Eliza looked at him, unsure how to answer. "I had no choice," she said finally. "They are all I have." Chayton nodded. "The spirits sent me that day. You were not meant to die." His tone was simple, matter of fact, but something in it stirred her heart, a quiet conviction that perhaps her survival was more than luck. The days grew longer, the snow began to melt, and Eliza's thoughts turned again to the future. She could not remain with the Cheyenne forever, yet she no longer knew where she belonged. The world beyond the valley seemed distant, even hostile. She had heard enough to understand that soldiers now patrolled the plains, driving tribes from their lands. Returning to the settlements might mean facing those who had abandoned her, or worse, those who would condemn her for finding shelter among savages. The thought filled her with dread. But when she looked at Chayton and the kindness in his eyes, she wondered if perhaps the path ahead was not one of returning, but of beginning anew. One night, a storm broke over the valley, thunder rolling like cannon fire, lightning illuminating the lodge walls in flashes of blue-white light. Samuel woke crying, and Eliza held him close until he slept again. Outside, she heard voices, movement. Chayton was preparing his horse, danger was near. When she stepped outside, rain slicked her hair to her face. He looked at her and said simply, "Riders come. Not my people." Fear knifed through her. She thought of soldiers, of bounty hunters who would not hesitate to treat her as a traitor for living among the Cheyenne. But Chayton's calm steadiness anchored her. "Stay," he told her. "I will see what they want." Hours later he returned, soaked and silent. The riders had been white men, searching for runaways, though he had not told them of her. He said only that he had seen no settlers in these parts. His loyalty startled her, and when he turned to leave, she found herself reaching for his arm. "You didn't have to protect me," she said. He looked down at her hand, then at her face. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." The storm passed, but its memory lingered. Something in the air between them changed, something unspoken but undeniable. Eliza felt it in the way he looked at her, in the way her heart quickened when he entered the lodge. She pushed the thought aside, telling herself it was gratitude, nothing more. Yet when the dawn came and the valley glowed with new light, she caught herself wondering whether the spirits Chayton spoke of had indeed meant for their paths to cross.